Hi, everybody. This is the second talk in my Deep Disruption series. If you've seen the first one, there's a bit of a recap for the first few slides, and then we get on to the effects of digitalization and deep disruption on the workplace. Before I start, a bit about myself. I've been working for the last 10 years or so in the area of digital transformation, mostly for large financial organizations. But along the way, I've taken several detours. I studied artificial intelligence in the UK, and then here in Switzerland at the Zurich ETH's Institute of Neuroinformatics, I contributed to projects building biologically inspired neural networks, which are today becoming increasingly popular in deep learning. In addition to that, I have a not-so-secret identity as a science fiction author, where I write near-future techno-optimistic sci-fi novels. I find myself wearing multiple hats, and until recently, they required very different perspectives. But over the past couple of years, I've begun to notice my day job and this sci-fi hobby of mine drawing closer together. Everything is speeding up around us. Radical changes pondered in novels, comics, and films for years are now right on our doorstep, and even short-term predictions are starting to sound like the plots from Hollywood's summer blockbusters. This is what I mean by deep disruption. It's the radical disruption of business and society through rapidly changing technology. So I decided to create this series of talks exploring the idea of deep disruption and the idea that sci-fi and the corporate worlds are essentially becoming the same thing. And also, sci-fi is a place where a lot of these ideas have been discussed for years anyway. Perhaps we can apply some of the lessons from sci-fi back to the real world. One key idea I want to highlight is the concept of exponential change. What is it? Why is it significant? And what the next decade might look like. So I hope you find the talk interesting, although there might not be any top 3 action items for you to take back to your department heads. Forewarned is forearmed, and I hope that the next 25 minutes might help you put the next 10 to 15 years of technological disruption in context. And that should help you and your organizations prosper. So first, are things really different this time? Or have people always been so breathless and hyperbolic about the future? Well, my answer is yes to both. People have always been agitated about the future, but also things really are different this time. The explanation for this apparent paradox is exponential technological acceleration. Things have always been getting quicker, but it's only recently that we passed some sort of threshold where change is now coming almost too fast for us to keep up. So first up, some background. People, and for the sake of argument, let's define people here as primates making stone tools, have existed for several million years. It's difficult to say exactly when we stopped being monkeys, and of course some will claim we still are, but the first hominins began making stone tools about 4 million years ago. Since then, for 99.9999% of all that time, pretty much nothing changed. The sharp stones people use to cut up their meat changed slightly, but these illustrations show us getting a little better at banging stones together over a period of 4 million years. If to us these pictures side by side look like very minor changes, we can be certain that from the perspective of the people, the individuals actually smashing these rocks together, the technology didn't appear to change at all. The world was essentially static. So you can understand that even 3,000 years ago, it was possible to make a claim which today would seem utterly outrageous. There is nothing new under the sun. In fact, our bodies changed more over those 4 million years than the shape of our tools. Now think about that for a second or two. Biological evolution of our species was generating the majority of the change. Technological change was glacial, in fact far less than glacial. The Earth had 40 ice ages in the time it took to go from cracked pebbles to chipped flakes. In this time, we grew upright, our brains expanded, but our technology remained pretty much unchanged. But then something happened. Within 10,000 years, we get fire, the wheel, steam engines, and iPhones. And if you were paying attention, you'd have noticed that also over that time, our brains began shrinking again. So this is what exponential change looks like. Lots of gradually where nothing much happens, followed by a tiny bit of suddenly where all the change is squashed in together. Over the last couple of centuries, this trend has continued. We get a new iPhone every summer, and we no longer have to wait a million years for the next incremental version of a tool. In the first decades of this century, we've already introduced drones, search engines, okay, that was 1997, but it's close enough, 3D printing, quantum computing, augmented reality, and we're now on the brink of nuclear fusion, smart dust, interplanetary commerce, anti-gravity, who knows what. Some people, like Gordon Moore, have put a number on this rate of acceleration. He noticed that chips were getting twice as powerful and half as expensive every 18 months. Others like Werner Vinge and Ray Kurzweil have pointed out that if things continue speeding up, pretty soon we're going to arrive at some very unintuitive places. Consider AI. AI has been a joke for 50 years, always around the corner but never quite arriving. And partly this is due to something called the AI effect, which is a psychological phenomena rather than a technological limitation. Basically, it says that artificial intelligence is whatever still hasn't been done by a machine. So as soon as AI researchers do manage to teach their machines to do something like playing chess, understanding spoken English, or destabilizing Western democracies, it's suddenly considered mundane. With recent progress in deep learning, we are really now seeing undeniable signs. Take Alexa or Google Duplex. Current predictions state that by 2030, $1,000 will buy you a synthetic intellect functionally equivalent to one human for most data tasks. So I'm not claiming here that our code will become self-aware. The question of consciousness is completely separate from intelligence, and it's not for us today. It is, though, something I find fascinating, so I'm always ready to jump into a conversation. But even if it's not conscious, the machines will certainly start acting as if they are. Programs will behave much more like organisms with agency than simple dumb code. And of course it doesn't stop there. By 2060, $1,000 will buy you an entire planet's equivalent worth of IQ. So when people ask the question, why does technology feel like it's speeding up? We can answer, because it really is. Now, it's about this time when I give this talk that people start to become skeptical and fidgety. They get the development from stone axes to iPhones, but throw up their hands when I start talking about billions of minds running in a VM. That's just silly, but is it? In our daily life, exponential growth is most familiar from the stock market. So let's plot the advancement of technology as if it was a stock chart. So we are here, and you might call the top. And it's true, we might be on the verge of a Great Depression, or worse. As Einstein said, I don't know what weapons will be used to fight World War III, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. But even if we are pessimistic, timing crashes is never trivial. From fire to the iPhone, we're basically on a 4 million year bull run. So let's be bullish and hope the upward trend will continue for a few more years. I try and be an optimist. I don't think we can time the big crash, so I like to spend my time thinking about more happy scenarios. Assuming the trend of exponential growth continues, what's on the horizon? And specifically, getting back to the purpose of this conference, what does it mean for the digital workplace? So I see a few major confluences of technology which will work together to shake up work. Firstly, AI. Now, as I mentioned, there are plenty of skeptics, but believe me, it's coming. Artificial intelligence seems to be more about scale than fancy algorithms. Neural networks were designed back in the 60s and 70s, and they had trouble telling an E from a 3, but they suddenly got convincingly smart when run on a few billion neurons. And one thing is for sure, computers will continue to get quicker, which means machines will continue to get smarter. In addition, with new ideas like generative adversarial neural networks, we're going to start seeing very clever algorithmic assistants sharing our workplaces soon. Next up, drones. Another obvious one. They will be everywhere, flying, walking or rolling, and they'll transform your core business by moving stuff around, but their cameras will also be able to build a real-time digital version of the world. Which brings us to augmented reality, the promise of HoloLens and Magic Leap. the merging of real life and virtual reality so that digital begins to bleed into the real. Combining AR and drones will let you have a real-time point of view anywhere. Wearing the appropriate headwear, specs in my books, you will feel present walking around a remote office chatting with your co-workers, even though you're sitting in your pajamas at home. Adding in IoT and 5G everything means that you will remotely be able to interact with the physical world. Everything will have an API, every light switch, every door, so even if you're not physically there, you'll still be able to interact, turning the light on or calling the elevator. This will be second nature. The real world is the ultimate user experience platform. It's one we use to learn from the time that we're babies. So a virtual world following the same rules will become very compelling very quickly. Finally, if we add AI into the mix, this will allow us to embody our digital assistants, giving them virtual bodies and allowing them to work alongside us. So Wired calls this the mirror world. AR, drones, IoT and AI working to create a world of digital consensus, which as the next decade comes to an end, will become as rich and complex as the boring old physical world, which has been our home for the past 2 billion years. So to summarize, the 2020s, they're going to be weird. The way you work is going to change radically. That is, if you're still working at all. Work is going to be shaken up. Many jobs will simply disappear. People like to argue whether technology creates or destroys work. For the sake of arguments, let's go with those who maintain that jobs will be created. But let's not forget that even here, the claim is only that new types of jobs will appear faster than the old ones are scrapped. The old jobs are still going in either scenario. And now this type of thing may repeat itself several times over a working life, so that an individual has to retrain many times. This will be fine for some, but tricky for others. And don't think IT is safe. Oxford University estimates there is a 48% chance that the profession of computer programmer is going to fall to the AIs within the next 1 to 2 decades. And that paper was published in 2013, so we're now talking only 10 to 15 years from now. In 2019, AIs are already writing programs using genetic algorithms. When $1,000 buys you a computer in a box, organizations are going to be creating whole departments of these things, putting them together in synthetic scrums, where each sprint lasts a few milliseconds. Like the million monkeys banging away on typewriters, these AIs will produce scrappy code, but other AIs will test, more will optimize, some will document, and then it will be sent back for a second iteration before a human has to get involved. Of course, it pretty much goes without saying that most of the human coders will be fired. Even deeply technical jobs are in the crosshairs. In fact, jobs that involve only doing things in the digital are more vulnerable than jobs in the real. Naively, we might think that lower paid jobs will go first, but digital work, even if it's more complex, has a very low barrier to entry. Replacing all the janitors requires purchasing robots from a factory which will need to build them first. Whereas a license tier upgrade to your SaaS provider, or if you're old school, a new Docker container deployed to your private tensor processing farm, can replace an entire job family in one major release over the weekend. So imagine the synthetic scrums stuffed into black boxes. Human business analysts will communicate with the scrum's virtual product owner. They'll ask the black box for some new functionality, and a few minutes later, after a few thousand sprints, out will pop an app. AI-generated code will be introduced in the big companies first. Like with cloud, they will pioneer the technology internally before making it available. Soon, though, much of the code you buy from vendors will be developed by bots, and in the not-so-distant future, our own enterprises will be deploying their internal synthetic scrum teams to customize code and eventually write whole new products. The end game here is that no two programs will be the same. Everything will be evolved, everything will be custom and constantly evolving. So we'll definitely need new skills. But even demand for new skills doesn't necessarily mean new jobs. As we have seen, the rate of change is going to be exponential, and it's going to be difficult for these new professions to hire or train or promote to fill these roles. It might have once taken 20 years to reach market capitalization of $1 billion, but with the new unicorns, the new exponential organizations, it can only take a couple of years now. Back in the days when big disruptions arrived once per generation, children would be exposed to exciting new possibilities written about in their adventure books. Train driving, fighter piloting, computer programming, university courses would be created, and a new generation of experts would move into the workforce to take on the new challenge, creating new professions as they went. Now, with several paradigm shifts a decade, the idea of training once at a profession and staying in that same line of work for your whole life seems naive. And I'm not talking about a job for life. That already went out with Thatcher and Cole in the 90s. But even this might not be going far enough. From the perspective of the exponential organization, where an idea needs to scale from concept to multi-billion market cap in a couple of years, a job is an inefficient, arbitrary bundle of skills, most of which have been redefined and incrementally taken on by bots anyway. For how long do you think Uber will bother with human drivers? And there will be an Uber for X, and for X insert your skill here. It will be far more efficient at matching experts with tasks than old school corporate hierarchies. This is a trend we already see. In the old hierarchical world, a department manager had a team of employees, was responsible for the operation and development of one or more products, was responsible for his team's careers, their HR issues, their seating, the IT infrastructure, and the service that it ran on, as well as negotiating with vendors, setting strategic direction, working on big picture architecture, and of course planning the Christmas party. In the new agile organizations that some of you are already working in, these tasks have been distributed. The department manager job no longer exists. A dedicated coach is responsible for the team's development and HR needs. Strategy and architecture bubble up out of lively Slack or Teams channels. Vendors have become strategic partners who themselves have embraced agile methodology and are unable to give you an outlook with any confidence beyond the next sprint. So there's no need for strategy or roadmaps. IT infrastructure is purchased from big cloud providers as and when it's required, and of course, due to cost savings, there is no Christmas party. It was anyway an embarrassing sectarian remnant of a colonial past. And this trend is only going to get more pronounced. Jobs will be increasingly sliced up and intelligently distributed in real time by algorithms. Uber for X will provide cleaners, plant care, transport, training, but also core business functions. The app economy will provide an internal marketplace, flexible working, synthetic team members, and who knows what else. Not only will your current job be gone, but the whole concept of jobs is increasingly looking quaint and old-fashioned. But you never know. You might still get that Christmas party. So automation is going to put people out of work. Apps and algorithms will replace professions and organizational structures. Just as firms performed ruthless segmentation to identify the most profitable groups within their customer base in the 2000s. Bronze, off-board or upsell, silver, profitable but don't deserve special attention, platinum, not overly price sensitive, willing to invest and try new offerings. Companies will need to triage their own employees using the same type of methodology. Unicorns, visionaries and technical wizards to be retained at all costs. API, currently necessary, not strategic, executing tasks incentivized by gamified apps. This segment will be something like the Uber driver, but for everything you do today in your job. The worker here will have become a replaceable subsystem, nothing more than a node in a redundant array of inexpensive people. And then we have the AI. These are the jobs that are cheaper to replace with bots. A few can be cross-trained, but the majority will have to be off-boarded. So if the bottom of the pyramid is off-boarded and run by bots, and the aristocrats are at the top, enjoying premium 5-star first-class everything, it's going to be the challenge of the digital workplace to provide a motivating, efficient environment for those in the middle. Now, I think it's going to do that through gamified experiences. Epic Games generates billions in revenue selling virtual loot. If they can motivate kids to spend real pocket money on virtual sneakers, perhaps companies can motivate employees to work harder and sacrifice pay rises in exchange for digital achievement badges or virtual six-packs for their HoloLens avatar. Virtual workplace. Real estate and providing working facilities is a huge cost. Companies are always searching for ways to recruit employees from locations with lower wages. They are also doing more business globally. Big head offices with expensive facilities will soon be seen as unnecessary overhead. It'll be much cheaper to build grand virtual head offices in some digital spaces. Perhaps some of those fortnight islands tantalizing on the horizon might be sold off as great new locations for corporate HQs. And then synthetic co-workers. The most intuitive, stress-free user experience is another friendly human trying to help you. We've already seen voice assistants like Siri and Alexa, and augmented reality will give these virtual assistants bodies, at least virtual bodies. Your human co-workers will mostly be remote anyway, so having a physical presence will be increasingly irrelevant. They will be your assistant at first, but you know how this is going to end up. Are you ready for a robot boss? So this sounds a bit grim, doesn't it? Of course, that's unless you're one of the new techno elites, in which case it sounds awesome. If you are lucky enough to be one of the few platinum-rated employees, you will do well. As automation climbs the pyramid, you will become increasingly valuable. Your employer will do everything in their power to keep you. First class everything, prestige, belonging, you will be the corporate aristocracy. In fact, when everything else is a service bought on demand, you will be the only real assets left. But it's anybody's guess how the other segments will react. We can be fairly confident if countries want to avoid full-on civil unrest, the kind seen during the last comparable change in the social fabric of society during the Industrial Revolution, there will need to be an expansion of benefits to those without work. This will most likely take the form of something like universal basic income or guaranteed jobs. It sounds fanciful, but some economists claim it can be paid for. After all, if all the robots are doing the work for free, the extra profits should be given back, or could be given back, to all the people who are now without work. But this is only one possible future. Let's call it the Blade Runner scenario. A few aristocrats above a seething underclass of humans existing in a grey twilight, living uninspired lives in the shadows of the corporations. Sadly, this does seem to be the direction that we're moving in at the moment, but there are other possible futures. Remember, there is no fate but what we make. Perhaps, like the village, the powers that be will decide people can't handle the truth, and they'll keep the masses safely hidden away from the corrupting dangers of technology. But we can go worse than that. There's the Mad Max future. Mankind denies the existential threats that are creeping up on us, and then suffers the inevitable catastrophes that are the result. Sadly, this is all too possible. But let's try and end on a high note. Remember, there's the Star Trek, which, by the way, is the way I learnt German, watching reruns of Raumschiff Enterprise Das nächste Jahrhundert. People in Star Trek don't work for money. They contribute because they are motivated to give their time and energy for some massive transformative purpose. Space, the final frontier, to explore strange new worlds and to boldly go where no one has gone before. Which is actually not too far away from Google's own organise all the world's information. But bringing things back closer to home, you don't have to be a charismatic unicorn like Google, SpaceX or Starfleet. Most people who go to work are interested in much more mundane, closer to home things like a safe place to work where you're free to be creative without worrying about being fired, a place where achievement is rewarded, and an opportunity to make an impact. Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer these forms of motivation to being goaded to work harder using the digital whip of gamification. Perhaps we'll surprise ourselves and transcend the concepts of money and greed, and we'll all soon be living in a post-scarcity utopia where people work for the pleasure of helping humanity achieve its manifest destiny to push out beyond Earth and bring enlightened positivity to the galaxy. At least that's what I try and write about in my sci-fi. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, it would be great if you would like it, and also subscribe to the channel where you'll always get the latest videos that I post. If you're a sci-fi fan, head on over to my website, which is linked here on the screen. There you can have a look at my blog, take a look at my books, and you can even download book 1 of the Singularities Children's series for free.